How's it going, guys? Brian here with Pitbull Audio, and I'm here with the one and only Michael League of Snarky Puppy. Michael, what's going on, man?
Not a lot. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for taking some time out of your day to come out here. I know you guys are playing. They're playing tonight at the House of Blues, and we were really lucky. Our friends over at Dunlop and MXR helped line this up and coordinate everything a little last minute, but we're really happy to have you here.
Thanks, man.
Thank you so much.
Glad to be here.
So I figured, we would sort of skip with the whole, why bass, how did you get started, and all of that. You're here, like I said, our friends over at Dunlop and MXR brought you over. So I was actually really curious. I wanted to talk to you about effects. In particular, you do a really great way of incorporating them into your bass lines and also into the songs in general. So first thing I was sort of wondering if you could talk about a little bit is, for the most part, I would say primarily effects pedals and effects in general sort of relegated to the guitar player side of things, right? If you're sort of comparing guitar and bass. And I was wondering if you could just talk about what were some of the first sounds maybe that you heard, what were some of your first inspirations that basically made you want to put together that first pedal board, start your pedal collection.
I guess it was probably Parliament. Like Bootsy, like with envelope filters and stuff like that, got me really into it initially. But then, actually, I would say the main guy who really turned me on to like the world of bass tones, bass sounds outside of kind of normal non-pedal stuff, was a bass player named Tim LaFave.
Yep.
Who lives in LA now. He was in New York for a long time. Just like, so many different, just like different kinds of octave pedals or different kinds of envelope filters, and understanding how different of a feeling each one has when you play it. It's not just an octaver or an envelope filter or a ring modulator. It's like, each pedal has its own personality, and what you contribute to the music with that personality, changes the whole kind of sonic landscape.
Yeah, big time. Man.
Especially the relationship between bass and drums, like that like what a drummer plays will feel different based on what you have going on, and so Tim was really inspiring for me for that, and is still inspiring. I mean, every time I see him, he's doing new things.
Yeah. He's a man of many talents.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Along those lines of sort of like, kind of what got you inspired to start using effects pedals, was sort of wondering if you could talk a little bit about how, conversely, sort of how effects pedals inspire and influence you. And you already sort of touched on that a little bit, the way that it impacts the bass player and the drummer relationship and stuff. But in particular, I was curious how it influences your creative process, right? Do you write like the bass line to a song dry, clean, unaffected, and then afterwards in the studio you're like, oh, what would be a cool effect to sort of put on this? Or as you're writing, because you do a lot of the composing as well for Snarky, as you're writing, do you go like, oh man, this part right here would be awesome with the bass, with these effects on it, sort of how do they influence your creative process?
I mean, in general, when I write a song and I'm writing individual parts, I hear the tones that I want during the composition process. So, I mean, like for example, a melody is inseparable from like the notes of the melody are inseparable from the sound that I want to hear from the guitar. So if I write a certain melody, I'm like, okay, this needs to be played with a slide, with this kind of delay, with this kind of reverb. That's how I write it. But once we start to record it, I try to not impose those ideas. I just know what I wanted originally, but I really like to see what the people in the band end up doing, because sometimes they end up playing things in ways that I wouldn't have expected, and it's cooler than what I intended.
Yeah.
So rather than kind of from the beginning be like, I need this sound, blah, 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 which also kind of restricts their creativity.
Sure.
It's cool to just kind of see what they come up with. And if they're like, yeah, I'm not really liking this, then I can say, well, actually, I intended this, so do you want to try that? And then sometimes that just provides like a starting place for some more exploration. So I try to really keep the whole process fluid, but to me, the elements of a composition and the tones with which I want those elements to kind of be played are inseparable at the beginning.
Yeah, so you kind of have those sounds at the inception of the song.
Yeah, I just try to not push them on people too much.
Right.
Depending on the person too, because some people would rather be told, like me in a studio, I would rather someone tell me, use this tone, play in this octave. I like when people are specific with me, but not every musician is like that. A lot of musicians prefer to like just give me the notes and the rhythm and all be creative with the rest.
Yeah, and sometimes that's where the magic happens too.
Of course.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to talk about in particular is this little guy here that we've got. It's the MXR M280 vintage bass octave mini, right? I think is officially what they put the word mini in there. It is awfully tiny. And Michael, so you kind of worked with MXR, or at least kind of gave them some guidelines, some suggestions on what they could do with a pedal like this. What was, not to put words in your mouth, but maybe what was missing out of all of the octavers that are already out there. Can you talk about maybe what you contributed to the development of the M280 and what maybe makes it a little bit different than all of the various octavers out there?
Yeah, well, I mean, in my pedal board, even when I go out with like the smallest possible pedal board, which actually I just use a cutting board from like IKEA, because it slips right into the pocket of my bass case, so it's perfect.
Perfect.
I just have a power brick by Dunlop, 2 octavers, a delay, and a bass wah. That's my whole power pedal board, so it's just 4 pedals basically.
Yeah.
And I always have 2 octavers, and kind of in the past, the 2 octavers have been the MXR Bass Octave Deluxe, which is my like kind of go-to octaver, all-purpose octave pedal, which I highly recommend for anyone who just like wants a versatile kind of. It's like the Converse All-Star of octave pedals. You can wear a suit or shorts and it's cool, you know.
Yep.
And then I always had a Boss OC2,
right? Yeah,
or
classic.
OC3, to have that kind of classic like club analog.
That like
exactly. Octave sound. And you know, Daryl at MXR and I were always talking about it. You know, kind of like it would be really nice to have something like that from MXR. You know,
right.
And finally, I mean, we had talked about a lot of, you know, there's a lot of. I'm always talking with Daryl about like it'd be really cool if you got, you know, blah blah blah. He's probably sick of hearing it, you know. But then he called me and said, "Hey man, you know, we have this exciting new project where we're making an octave pedal similar to the OC2, but with its own character and small."
Yeah.
And I was like, that's perfect. I mean, for the cutting board, pedal board, it's like amazing, you know? And they're really doing this with a lot of pedals now. You know, they're doing it with the carbon copy, which is the delay pedal that I have in my pedal board. Also like Converse All-Star of delay pedal. Just like, it's so versatile. You can use it for anything.
Yeah. We have that as well.
Yeah, and it's they're great. So they just made a mini version of that. So
They
it's
did,
like,
yeah. I think today is actually the official launch date for it.
So, you know, he hit me up about the pedal, and I went in and tried out the prototype, and I told him, I like this, I don't like this, you know, blah, blah, blah. And then the next time I came back, we A-B'd it with a Boss OC2, you know, and I was like, this thing's awesome, man. It's got its own voice, it's tiny, you know, it's got, you know, different functions that could be talked about in detail, but Yeah.
So that's what's cool. It kind of can take the place of that OC2, but it's not just another OC2. It's got the mid switch on there, similar to the bass octave deluxe, and a little bit of its own character. Right?
And yeah, and if you have space on your board to have, an octave deluxe, this, this new one from MXR, and an OC2, you have 3 different personalities, which is nice.
Yeah.
It's not just like it's not like a knockoff. It's
really
got its own thing happening, and I mean, it's a great company. They do great stuff. They're very conscientious.
Yeah, and they're really great guys to work with too.
They're cool,
I
yeah.
imagine from your side of things,
Super
you probably experienced that too, right?
Super cool.
Yeah.
Super the best. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, cool. That pretty much wraps it up. I really, really appreciate your time.
Yeah, you got it, man.
Thank you so much for coming out.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Michael League of Snarky Puppy. Thank you guys so much. Check out pitbullaudio.com for all Dunlop and MXR needs. Thanks, guys.